July 2nd, 1839, enslaved West Africans rise up against their captors on the Cuban schooner Amistad. But what ultimately happened to these enslaved Africans? And what is their connection to a former U.S. president? The captives of the Amistad were of the Mende tribe and had been captured in Sierra Leone in West Africa and transported across the Atlantic Ocean on a Portuguese ship called the Tecora to the Spanish slave markets of Havana, Cuba. They were then forced to board the Amistad to be taken to a sugar plantation at Puerto Príncipe, Cuba. It was during this voyage that these 53 captives revolted, killing 2 crew members and seizing control of the ship. The mutiny was led by Joseph Cinqué, who had been a rice farmer back home in West Africa. Cinqué and his fellow mutineers hoped to sail back to Africa, but lacked knowledge of high seas navigation. Forced to rely on surviving crew members to navigate the ship, the Amistad instead sailed north along the east coast of the United States. A U.S. Navy vessel eventually seized the Amistad off Long Island, and Cinqué and his compatriots were imprisoned and tried in New Haven, Connecticut. The Africans' case for freedom went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. 73-year-old former U.S. President John Quincy Adams, the son of founding father John Adams, helped argue on behalf of the Africans before the High Court. Because the U.S. had outlawed the international slave trade more than 30 years earlier in 1808, the justices ruled in 1841 that the Africans on the Amistad had been illegally enslaved and therefore had the right to fight for their freedom. With financial assistance from abolitionist allies, the Africans were transported back to West Africa. One of them, Sara Margru Kinson, who was a child at the time of her abduction, actually returned to the U.S. to study at Oberlin College in Ohio, then went back to Sierra Leone as an evangelical missionary. Director Steven Spielberg chronicled the story of the Amistad in his 1997 film, Amistad. In 2026, while visiting New Haven, Connecticut, the home of Yale University and the epicenter of the Amistad affair, Mrs. Lewis and I were impressed by the New Haven Museum's Amistad exhibit, which chronicles the story of this fascinating chapter in history. Here are other events that happened today in history. In 1644, parliamentary forces hand royalists their first major defeat of the English Civil Wars at Marston Moor. In 1776, in Philadelphia, the Continental Congress votes to declare independence from Britain. In 1865, William and Catherine Booth established the Christian Mission, later known as the Salvation Army. In 1881, U.S. President James Garfield is fatally shot at a railway station in Washington, D.C. In 1937, Amelia Earhart and navigator Frederick Noonan disappear near Howland Island in the Pacific Ocean. In 1964, U.S. President Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act, outlawing racial discrimination and segregation. In 2005, Pink Floyd members reunite to play together for the final time at the Live 8 concert in London. And now it's time for our Today in History quiz. In 1988, the U.S. Navy cruiser Vincennes shot down a passenger jet from which country after mistaking it for a hostile fighter plane? India, Indonesia, Iran, or Iraq? Liked learning about the Amistad? Then you'll enjoy this one about the deadliest slave revolt in American history. Tap the screen to keep the story going on Today in History.